Everyone has a ghost story, a personal family experience, something that happened to a friend, an uncle, or even ourselves. Today's guest tells us that sometimes these stories are comforting and sometimes they are not, but there's a lot we can learn from them. She's Amy Bruni this week on Story in the Public Square. Hello and welcome to Story in the Public Square, where storytelling meets public affairs. I'm Jim Ludis from the Pell Center at Salve Regina University. Joining me, as always, is my friend and co-host G. Wayne Miller of the Providence Journal. Each week we talk about big issues with great guests, authors, journalists, artists, and more to make sense of the big stories shaping public life in the United States today. This week, we're joined by Amy Bruni, a paranormal investigator, host of the Travel Channel's hit show Kindred Spirits, and author of a new book, Life with the Afterlife 13 Truths I Learned About Ghosts. Amy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, the book is phenomenal and the shows are great. And so we want to talk to you about all of that. But tell us a little bit about when you first saw a ghost.
Actually, I had a few paranormal experiences as a child, but the one that stood out the most that really started raising questions for me was when I saw a full-bodied apparition standing outside a second story window in the house that I grew up in Alameda, California. And the way that was situated, there's no way someone could have been standing outside that window. And then later on, my mom and I found out that there used to be a wraparound porch there. So there was a point in time where someone could have stood there. And from that point on, I was hooked.
Were you scared? Were you frightened?
It's funny because I was not taught to be afraid of ghosts at that point, and a lot of kids are kind of that way. It's more of like a curiosity. If they haven't been taught that ghosts are a scary thing, they don't get scared. For me, I had more of like a stranger danger moment where I was like, who is this strange man? I need to get my mom. That was my first thought. And then I kind of processed the fact that there was no way someone could have been standing there.
So both of your parents were into the supernatural or very interested in the supernatural. Your mother used to talk about seeing a little boy run between rooms, and your dad explored the supernatural with his research. So it was normal for ghosts to be in your life growing up. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would absolutely say so. I mean, for us, obviously it wasn't like a living or anything. It was just an interest that my parents had. And the way they talked about it was so matter of fact. And, they're just like, sometimes there's ghosts. And so I never thought that it was a scary thing. Obviously since then I've had many scary ghost experiences, but being raised in that environment, it just really piqued my curiosity, and it never went away. I continued to read about the history of spiritualism and ghosts, and still to this day, I'm so curious.
What did friends and neighbors think about your house and your family? I mean,
Well,
it was not your quote unquote average family, at least.
no. I mean, I think if they didn't know us very well, we were pretty average, But I think that like we had some neighbors, I talk about this in the book, who they used to come over for dinner all the time. I played with their son. And they had a few experiences in the house when they came over to visit. And there was at one point when they were basically saying that spirits, they weren't sure they were real and they weren't sure if the house was haunted. And at that point, this picture came off the wall and hovered for a second and then crashed to the ground. And they left the house and they never set foot in our house again. The mom would come to like she would let her son come over, but she would stand like on the lawn to come get him. They never set foot in that house again after that.
So, Amy, in your book, Life with the Afterlife, you say pretty candidly that you don't really know what these paranormal activities are. But what's your best guess?
Well, I think from my interaction with what I believe could be spirits, I do think that they are some bit of us that's left behind after we pass. I do think that classic idea of unfinished business sometimes holds a piece of someone's consciousness here. That is my best guess, but I will never claim to say that that's absolutely what a ghost is. You know, you never know if it's going to be explained one day with quantum physics or time folds. Like there's so many possibilities. And the more that we do this and the more kind of strange experiments we do, the more questions we have. And so that's why I make a really big point in the book to never speak in absolutes. I'm just sharing my ideas, and I love hearing others' ideas and what they think ghosts and spirits could be.
So you also write that ghosts are people too, and it's important to respect their free will to the extent that they still have it, and most important, respect their personal beliefs. That's a big concept. Talk about that, and certainly is an intriguing and new concept for me until I've read your book.
Yeah, if spirits are in fact, a bit of a person left behind, I started to realize we were kind of doing maybe a potential disservice in either trying to shoo them away and cleanse the space or and just not listening to them. And we found in our investigations, the second we start really identifying who these spirits could be and talking to them on a level like I'm talking to you right now, the interactions we got were a lot more intriguing. And so that's really what it was. Just I felt like I said, we were being just sort of dismissive to this idea and making them into something spooky and making them a novelty. But once you think about yourself in that position and you're desperately trying to reach out for someone and you keep trying and then they just leave you there, it's scary to think about, really.
It almost seems lonely. I mean, that was there are a couple of different passages in your book where you described encounters that left me with a sense of sadness. Can you talk about that a
Definitely.
little bit?
Yeah, definitely. It's there were moments. I think really the turning point for me was Adam and I were investigating a place called Waverly Hills in Louisville, Kentucky, and I used to be on a show called Ghost Hunters years ago. And really, the idea of that show was to kind of walk in, get some evidence of a spirit, and go, "Yep, your place is haunted. See you later." And that was the first time where, not the first time, but we had a very long interaction in the nurses' wing there, and we felt these spirits. They were communicating through a series of knocks, and we also got some EVPs, which are electronic voice phenomena. And they were desperate to talk to us, and they just communicated for so long, and it was very emotional. And then we just had to leave them, and we cried the whole way walking down that hallway, leaving, and they were knocking on the wall, following us the whole way out the building. And then I even got back to my hotel room. The sun's coming up, and I'm trying to go to sleep, and I hear a knock, knock on my wall, like they had actually followed and wanted to continue the conversation. And so it's just moments like that, I think, really are what brought about the show Kindred Spirits, but also, made me want to write this book.
Have you done a lot of other work in old or closed institutions, psychiatric institutions, tuberculosis sanatoria? I know in my own writing, I've been inside places like that, and they're spooky. I've not had a ghost experience there, although I have elsewhere. But so, have you done more work in those places, and why would they be particularly rich with spirits, to put it that way?
I have been in many of them, and I think that just the sheer number, well, a lot of the older institutions, the mistreatment of patients there was awful, especially when you get into some of the older asylums and things. And I think that there is that trauma. There is an idea that, like, traumatic events do leave behind something, whether that's actually a piece of someone's consciousness or if that's just some sort of residual energy. That's something you have to kind of go in and ascertain as an investigator. But I also think when you have that many people who've passed on, like at Waverly Hills, for example, they estimate anywhere up to 10,000 people could have passed away there over the years. And each one of those folks has a story. And, you never know why they could be lingering. And so it is kind of going through and it makes it a much more massive operation for sure, because we have to kind of identify them one by one and figure out why they're lingering. But it's so much more than just, I died here. It's usually something a lot more intense.
Well, one of the things that I love about the way you approach your episodes and even the storytelling in this book is you're doing more than just sort of going out looking for ghosts. You're uncovering the history of institutions, of what life was like in those places, and of individuals who may be the spirit left behind. Talk to us a little bit about the use of pursuing the afterlife, and also what that tells us about our own history.
Well, history is a huge part of what we do. I can sit all day and try to prove the existence of ghosts. And people can be skeptical about it or not, but I will absolutely make sure my history is right. That is one thing that I can prove and I can get records of. And so that's something that, I can without a doubt get correct if I do my due diligence. And it's a big part of investigating. And I think that some people turn to the paranormal because they had a love of history and it kind of led them down the path of ghosts, and then vice versa. Some people, just come into it and suddenly realize that history is such an intense part of it, which I, as a historical researcher, I love. And so we look past just the ghosts when it comes to the history. There's actually a lot of, we like to spotlight historical societies because they're dying, really, if you think about it, especially now. We like to spotlight local history and get it correct. Like we just did the Valley Inn locally here in Rhode Island and uncovered this whole 400-year-old murder mystery. So there's something to that, and we want to make sure we get it correct.
So in sort of the classic ghost hunting expedition, and there are a lot of clubs that still do this, there were obviously TV shows, they use special equipment, and I don't profess to understand what that equipment is. But my question for you is, do you use any kind of equipment? I mean, obviously you've got camera crews, but I mean in terms of the actual paranormal research. Tell us about that.
Yes, absolutely. So for me, when I first got into this, or when tech really started taking over ghost hunting, because there was a time where tech was very big, and what there's really not a lot. Well, now there's more gadgets that are made specifically for paranormal investigation. For a while, we were just kind of adapting to what was out there and using things that were built for other functions and using them in the paranormal. So that was interesting to me. And then I started to realize that it really didn't matter how much evidence I got of a spirit, if I got an EMF reading, which is big when you're ghost hunting, or if I got a full-bodied apparition caught on camera. I was doing that because I wanted to prove the existence of ghosts to people. And then when I realized there's never going to be enough proof for some people, I shifted back to using things that I felt were good for communication, like using a digital voice recorder, using cameras to kind of set up the stage so I know what my layout is if I want to look back at something later. But I shifted away from a lot of the tech. And so we still use EMF detectors and things like that, but I focus a lot on personal experience and having conversations. And, we do use spirit boxes, which are this kind of thing that creates white noise that we think spirits can manipulate and make words from and things. But the kind of more high-tech stuff, we've really kind of walked away from. I also think it might be intimidating to them. Like if I'm walking in and, if you walk into a space and you're like, here's all these crazy things you've never seen before, ghosts from the 1800s. They might not respond to you.
Yeah, I could get that. In your writing and in your work, the quality of empathy is so significant. Talk about that. You clearly have empathy for ghosts, and then I want to get into people who live in haunted places. But start with the empathy you feel towards these spirits. That seems distinctive, or certainly different from, again, the classic, traditional ghost hunting thing.
Well, I realize when we do EVP work, which is where you use a voice recorder and ask questions and then play it back, and you'll get responses sometimes, voices that weren't there when you were asking the questions originally. the top two EVPs that we would get were help me and get out. And so I realized, like, how many of these folks are asking for help, and how many of them are so upset that they're just over it and they want us to leave. And I just started putting kind of I started humanizing them, and it just completely changed the way we investigated. Now I walk into a space and I basically act as though I'm walking into a room with a bunch of people, and I'm introducing myself and I'm trying to make them comfortable with me, as opposed to, walking in and being like, do you know you're dead? Or, I try to just be conversational. And many of these people in theory could have gone through something awful or traumatic, or there's, again, some sort of unfinished business they need help with. And a little bit of kindness goes a long way.
You
What?
also you also have kindness and empathy for people who live in places, homes particularly, that are haunted. And I want to read a quote from your co-star Chip Coffey, which I really liked regarding your work. And he said, "It's almost like social work for the living and the dead." Explain that for us.
Well, some of the more haunted homes that we go into, some of these families have been dealing with this paranormal activity for years, and they've either been too afraid to say something, or they feel like people don't believe them. We've actually encountered people who have legitimate PTSD from some of their experiences that they've had. And anxiety issues, like, it's so much more than just my house is haunted. For people who are living in a violently haunted home, it is traumatic, and there's not anyone they can turn to other than someone like me. If they bring it up to, like, a therapist or something, if that therapist doesn't believe in ghosts, then they're going to think something entirely different could be going on. And um, so it is kind of like doing social work. And then also, there's sometimes when there's family issues going on, it can raise the activity level in a space. The energy can change. Spirits can get more kind of active because of that. And so we kind of have to identify that going in as well. And then we're not mental health professionals by any stretch, but we do sometimes have to have that conversation that, we do feel like someone might need to, explore some medical possibilities. So it's a very interesting conversation to have here and there. And there's so much more to it than just going in and trying to find a ghost.
Amy, do you get scared?
I do. I get startled. There was a time, if I see something, there's this, like, processing moment that happens. So, for example, I saw an apparition in an asylum where this man just appeared right in front of me, full bodied apparition, and disappeared. And he was very angry. And that moment was very scary to me, because your body, it's not just your brain kind of going through this. Your body goes through, like, kind of this fight or flight moment where you feel like this is unnatural, something is strange here, and your instinct is to run. And so those kinds of things do startle me, but then I had to process it, and I go through all of the possibilities of what it could have been, if it was actually a spirit, and then I kind of, like, have to talk myself down a little bit. But yeah, I definitely do. And also, a lot of the places we go have, animals and, and strange things that will jump out at you that aren't ghost related.
Have you ever felt in danger? I mean, from both, the environment, animals in dark places and old closed institutions, but from ghosts. Have you ever, you talked about flight or fight. Have you ever felt like, oh my God, my life is really at risk at this moment?
I have not from spirits. I'm very confident in my ability to handle something like that. I am definitely aware, like I said, like you mentioned, aware of some of the locations we go into and how dangerous they can be. I filmed Ghost Hunters until I was 8 months pregnant, and so that was probably the one time where I was very conscious of some of these really old, dangerous buildings we go into, um, and so that to me is much scarier. But it's the living that scare me a lot more than the dead. There have definitely been a few homes I've walked into where I wasn't sure that the homeowner was entirely stable, that kind of thing, especially some of the ones I did prior to being on camera. So that to me is scarier, but the dead I feel like I can handle.
One of the things that we've talked about a little bit on this show is this idea of esoteric knowledge, knowledge that's hidden to the rest of the world, right? And I wonder if you have any thoughts about sort of the appeal of that in American life today. This idea that there are secrets or just knowledge, otherworldly knowledge sometimes, that we just, only the few privileged have access to. Do you have any thoughts about that phenomena in America today?
I'm actually surprised that more people don't pay attention to it. You know what I mean? I feel like we basically had like government confirmation of UFOs existing recently, and it just kind of went.
It was like the fifth
It was
story in the news, right? It was.
I mean,
In fairness to journalists, it's been kind of a busy 4 years in news, okay? Just saying. But
exactly. So I guess if this was the year to release it, this was the year to do it. But to me, so UFOs to me are terrifying. But that I was just shocked. People in my circle and like in the paranormal field, they were just like, "This is insane." And so it is. It's crazy to me that people don't seem to be paying as much attention to things like that as I feel like they used to. But the ones who do, there is a very deep and intense interest in it when they do, and I think that fuels a lot of things like the popularity of like Coast to Coast AM and things like my book. I think that people have belief. Ghosts are a belief system, and I do think that it borders on religion, to be honest, because it's all these ideas of the afterlife and where we go, what we do. And so I think that kind of interest just never wanes. But right now, I think people are so clogged with so many other worries and things that it's just a little wild to me how some of it's flying under the radar.
So obviously in your work, you deal with people who have ghosts in their homes or have had ghost experiences. But aside from your work, just in sort of everyday life or conversations with people, do you find people have ghost stories, for lack of a better word, have had a ghost experience, not necessarily something you've investigated, but is that a common element, do you think, in our culture now?
Absolutely. I mean, I meet people who don't even believe in ghosts, but they'll say, but there was this one time, and then they'll tell me this really crazy ghost story. And so, I think people feel comfortable talking to me about it. I live in one of the most haunted places in the country in New England, and everyone's got a great ghost story here. And I love that there is that kind of comfort level when they see me, that they know they can confide that in me, because not everybody takes it seriously. But I would say a close, probably 80% of the population has had some sort of unexplainable moment that they consider could be ghostly. But a lot of them will have it and then they'll explain it away as time goes on, that kind of thing. But like even my daughter's teacher came up to me with a crazy ghost story, and the principal of her school, and it's just so funny how people come out of the woodwork, and I love it.
What does popular culture get right about ghosts, and what does it get wrong?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think that I think that there are some movies where I felt like they were kind of going down the path of like, this could very well be what a ghost is. Like The Others is one of my favorite examples of that with Nicole Kidman. I don't know if you've seen it, but spoiler alert, basically the people, the family in the movie that you watch the whole movie, it turns out they're the ghosts. They're living in their house and they're wondering what's going on around them, but they are the ghosts. And so I kind of feel like that's something that could actually be the case, where they don't realize that they have passed. But then there's others where they're very terrifying and that they're going to possess you. And I think that in popular culture and also in a lot of reality shows, the idea of demonic type hauntings are a lot more prevalent than they actually are, considering I've been at this for 20 years and have probably seen maybe one or two very negative type hauntings and all of that.
So you mentioned you have a daughter. And she's a young daughter. what is her take on what you do, and what's her take on ghosts? I mean, mom is in the business, and so I'm sure it comes up in conversations at home.
Got
Yes,
about a
it
minute and a
does.
half left.
Say that for her, right now, my job is kind of cool. I'm waiting until her teenage years when she's completely embarrassed by me. But I still talk
It'll
to
happen,
her
by the
like,
way. It's inevitable.
I just talk to her like it's a fun thing. Because I feel like if you get too serious about ghosts with kids, it starts to bring up a lot of questions about death and mortality and stuff that they don't need to think about yet. So I keep it very casual for her. And for her right now, it's like Casper. It's a lot of fun. She likes to come with me sometimes to work, but it's a novelty for sure.
Well, in the about 40 seconds that we have left, what's next on Kindred Spirits?
Yeah, so we've moved to Discovery Plus, which is a whole streaming platform for all of the Discovery channels, which is amazing. It really opens up our audience. And so every Saturday, a new episode drops on Discovery Plus, and we've done some really wild cases this season, all during a pandemic, which was definitely interesting.
Well, we will look forward to it. And Amy Bruni, thank you so much for being with us. She is Amy Bruni. The show is Kindred Spirits, and the book is Life with the Afterlife. You should check it out. That's all the time we have this week for Story in the Public Square. But if you want to know more, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit pellcenter.org, where you can also catch up on previous episodes. For G. Wayne Miller, I'm Jim Ludis, asking you to join us again next time for more Story in the Public Square.